and passive insertion into the world economy. However, analysis of the industrialization experience in the Asian 14 shows that openness, while necessary, was not sufficient. It was conducive to industrialization only when combined with industrial policy. Now, it is worth citing some examples, although practices varied across countries and changed over time. Trade policy was characterized by an asymmetry, as it was open for the export sector but restrictive for other sectors, while exchange rates were undervalued for long periods to support the entry of domestic manufactured goods into world markets, insofar as price can substitute for quality until you become competitive. Regimes for foreign direct investment or foreign technology were calibrated to facilitate industrialization, often using strategic bargaining with large international firms. Singapore is the classic example because Korea and Taiwan rely much more on domestic firms. They imported technology. Singapore, the government owns all the land in Singapore, and land was its bargaining power. China has followed in Singapore's footsteps because Deng Xiaoping's first lessons for change in 1978 came from Lee Kuan Yew, and China had much more to bargain with in terms of cheap labor, in terms of outlaw trade unions, in terms of an infrastructure, and so on. Now, the allocation of investment to selected sectors was influenced by the strategic use of differential interest rates or tax concessions. Okay, that's the example of the Republic of Korea and Taiwan, respectively. Industrial finance was provided through development banks. India was a pioneer in the success story then. Most important, perhaps, there was a coordination of such economic policies across sectors and over time. The pioneering success stories, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, are classic examples of the use of industrial policy through government intervention to realize scale economies, foster vertical diversification, encourage technological upgrading, and develop global brands. The most recent success story, China, has used industrial policy in a very different context in learning to industrialize and then building domestic capabilities in pursuit of long-term objectives. Vietnam is attempting to follow in the footsteps of China, although it's never willing to admit that. The industrial dynamism of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand waned after the Asian financial crisis, which could have been sustained if industrial policy had been more purposive and more effective. India, the most industrialized to start with, lagged behind the leaders. In 1970, it was the most industrialized country in Asia. It is now way behind China and behind South Korea. It ranks third. It lagged behind the leaders because industrial policy was poorly implemented or was simply not used. But its success in pharmaceuticals, automobiles, and software is attributable to industrial policy. Bangladesh, too, has used industrial policy to drive its garments export-led industrialization. Clearly, success at industrialization in Asia was driven by sensible industrial policy that was implemented by effective governance.